Episode of our Locked On Hawks postcast is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. And the Locked On Hawks postcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, the Hawks, Deshaun, were trying to get a win in their final home game of the regular season, but we'll have to talk about how the Beehive stung them instead in the and what. And we'll talk about getting dubs on the road ahead of the play-in and who got next. But first, T and Tate take you to our takes or through our takes on a 115-114 head scratcher of a loss to the Hornets. And Tate, you said addition by subtraction simply did not work.
For sure. Another head scratcher, I guess, is. I know we're going to talk a little bit more later about what it is about this team. Again, we know how this team, the Atlanta Hawks, typically finds a way to play well against Boston and typically finds a way to play well against Milwaukee. And we kind of frustrate their fans a little bit. Well, this time it was our turn. Again, I thought we were kind of past this a little bit, but nonetheless, I think there was a few reasons for it. If I'm just being honest, I think it was addition by subtraction because I kind of, it kind of made sense to me that it seems like the team really wanted to kind of focus on getting healthy, let alone trying to stay healthy to some of the guys. Obviously, we get Trae back for the first time, but with some of the guys seeing limited, minutes and time of being able to play. But I'll be honest with you, like I enjoy, and I've been enjoying some of the things that we've been seeing out of some of the guys that's coming off the bench and some of the roles. Like, I'll be honest, yes, DeJounte played a very big part of this year, especially in Trae's absence. And maybe one or two other guys here and there, Jalen Johnson even, right? But we've been seeing some pretty big steps taken by this lack of depth and talent coming off of the bench the later that we've gotten into the season. To be able to see those guys get some time, I think has been good. I think that is, I'm probably somewhere in the middle, Tanisha, between why we saw tonight look the way that it did. I think that definitely holds some significant weight, but I don't think that is all of it either, because at the end of the day, the game still has to be played. And if you're the Atlanta Hawks, you got to defend home court and you got to win that game for the finale.
Exactly. I mean, there's no if, and, or but about it. Now, I will say this about how you won, and particularly who you didn't win with, was someone who I was wrong about. I was pretty adamant, and maybe hopeful is a better word, that Trae Young wasn't going to play, but I was wrong, and I'm okay with that, because it's tough when you don't have your star player in for the clip that he's been out, which was since February 23rd. I mean, that's almost 2 months. So that's a very difficult road to hoe. And the Hawks, give them credit for keeping their heads above water and actually fighting their way back into a tie with the Bulls for 9th place in the East that ultimately obviously has gone away. But you got to give them credit for the work that they did. But you will never not take an opportunity to have your star back. And I understood the rationale for it. You got to get him back in there and get him game ready. And you kind of have to see what he's able to do. Like, he was, obviously favoring his right hand, right? Or his left hand. So knowing that he couldn't do as much as he would normally do with that hand, but there were times where you saw him kind of force the issue, like, hey, I'm going to play my game with both of these hands because I need to see exactly for myself what I'm able to do. So it was kind of nice to see that. And even it's kind of funny because, of course, the media section is right above the sixth man, I guess is what they call him, or the 12th man, whatever they call it, the sixth man. Because I think 12th man is for football for Texas A&M. So sixth man.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Right. Or you can say Seattle as well.
Look at me. Look at me.
Look at you knowing some football. Whoa, people, are you listening? But yeah, like the sixth man was having so much fun because, of course, they saw his first bucket and then they saw him do a nasty swipe at the beginning, pickpocket, and they were like, two-way Trae. So it was nice to see him back and nice to see that he was willing to test himself to see exactly what he was capable of. And he gets to play, about 21 minutes. And in that 21 minutes, did a pretty nice job. I think that his final box score was what you would have expected for someone who's been out for 6 weeks. But
Sure.
what was nice, and as far as the minutes, I should say, and the fact that he scored about 14 points, I expected him to do the same somewhere in like the mid to upper teens, but it was the way he did it. He was perfect from the field, 2 for 2 from the 3-point line, perfect from the free throw line, and had 4 rebounds and 11 assists and that steal to go with it. So I thought just him having an all around game, even if it was kind of like just a basic game, was still pretty impressive in his return.
I think so too. I mean, considering the fact that this is not only the first time that we've seen, Trae kind of really sitting out
Yeah,
for
had
very
never seen it
much
before.
time at all, but also extensive time. And,
Yes.
you kind of still have to get back into, people think that you can just roll the balls out and go out there and just start playing. It doesn't work like that, especially for, point guards and whatever else, what have you, the certain roles that he does have to play for this team. And for this team to be able to gather victories, knowing that he's the shooter that he is, and
Yeah.
the lob thrower that he is, the cross court distributor and facilitator that he
Mhm.
is as well. And we all like to think of sometimes things like, I don't really need that pinky toe or that pinky finger that bad. You just don't really imagine what kind of an impact it has on your regular everyday life
Yeah.
until you
Yeah.
injure it or get a paper cut or something on it or whatever in the case may be. And it could be like the
Mhm.
smallest thing. And then you kind of realize, like, man, I use this thing a whole lot more than I think that I do. So to be able to still get, 11 assists, your 14 points, not miss a shot, make sure that we throw that out there as well. I thought that was pretty good considering the amount of time that he's missed.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. And I think the other thing is this: I was erring on the side of caution because you know me. Before Jalen got hurt,
Yeah.
and then definitely after Jalen got hurt, I was like, can we just put everybody in a bubble wrap
Right.
until the play in?
Right.
Like,
Right.
yeah. So, I admit that my mind probably went harder in that direction than maybe thinking about what you just said, which is if this were someone coming in who plays at the 5 or even the 4, meaning they're not facilitating this offense, then
Sure.
that person can probably come in cold in the playing round and be effective. But for someone who has to get reacclimated, and more importantly, for the players around him to get reacclimated
Hmm.
to him playing that point and running point, because he runs such a different style of point than DeJounte Murray, you kind of need him in. I guess the only question is, well, you kind of need him in, but let's just talk about the starters that were with him. Let's not act like that's who he's going to be running point for
True.
when it comes
True.
to the playoffs. But we'll hold that thought because we're going to have more conversation around that coming up soon. We will actually come back in the and one, and we're going to talk more about how in the world you're up 18 and go down one. But also, we're going to talk a little bit more about those others that surrounded Trae in the and one. This episode of the Locked On Hawks Postcast is brought to you by Game Time. Now, Game Time is the newly authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. And I'm a little bit of a gambler in that regard. So if you don't mind waiting until like that last minute, you can get some really good seats at a really good price with killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. So think about this. Last minute deals save up to 60% off buying those for sports, concerts, comedy, even theater tickets. And then you've got flash deals as well, where you have exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event, and the lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. First, download that Game Time app, then create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but again, create the account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today, of course, after you watch Locked On Hawks Postcast. And last minute tickets are the lowest price, and that's guaranteed. All right, Deshaun, we could use whatever is the antithesis of a superlative right here. And this is definitely where we want you guys to chime in because we know you feel some type of way as well.
Hold
So
on, hold,
tell
hold
us how
on,
you
hold on,
feel.
hold on, Tanisha. Give me that verbiage one more time. You could have lost me for a second. My girl's serious with the wordplay for real.
So I said basically, what we saw tonight was like the opposite
Okay.
of
Okay. See,
yeah.
I know what that means. I can spell that.
Right. So basically, we saw the opposite of a team that we want to compliment as far as what the final outcome was. But let's be honest, it's not something that we were shocked about because we've seen it before. We're talking about the Hawks being up 18 and then all of a sudden losing by 115 to 114 to the quote unquote lowly Hornets. They might be lowly, but they have for the second year in a row won the season series 3-1. And this is that same Hornets team that 2 games ago against the Hawks, they had just won 12 games and then they beat the Hawks. What is it about this little team up 95 North? Is it
Yeah.
95 or 85 North? That keeps on, I think
Yeah.
it's 85 at that point.
85.
But
Yeah.
yeah, what is it about this little team up 85 North that keeps giving the Hawks fits?
Yeah. I don't know.
I
Like
don't
I've been
know.
trying to put my
I know.
finger on this thing for the
It's
longest. Like
been so tough.
I mean, I'll be honest.
Because
Let's just keep this thing all the
yes,
way real.
right,
So I want to have a really cool answer, right?
right.
I want to have something like nobody's thought of. Well, this matchup and this and that. It really isn't for any rhyme or reason. Like it really cannot be explained. I know
At
that they
all.
are they are a very physical team, and I do
Yes,
notice that sometimes, you know, talking about
the
the
challenges, yeah, that they face.
challenges and
Yeah.
different things like that. Yeah, like
Mhm.
when we tend to play Miami,
Yep.
sometimes it's a mentally
Yeah,
it's a physical from a physical standpoint, it becomes a mental
indeed.
thing. Maybe not
Indeed.
as much New York because New York is a physical team too.
Mhm.
But even in some instances, which we'll probably end up talking about within the next few days here, sometimes Chicago can tend to be
Chicago,
that
yep.
team as well,
That's a
kind
great
of one of those physical teams. So
yeah,
Charlotte is one of those teams, maybe not
indeed.
full of as much, talent,
Mhm.
or veteran leadership and leading by example type of team,
Yeah.
Charlotte, but nonetheless, they always find a way,
And
against Atlanta. But I do tend to see and they don't give up. Like you look at this
at
Brandon,
all.
the Brandon Miller kid who was just
He
phenomenal
ain't never
tonight.
skipped.
He's amongst rookies, top rookies all time in 3-pointers, all time
Yeah,
in the NBA amongst
right.
rookies, only in 3-pointers made, and he was killing it on tonight. Even 27 points, had 5 3, shot over 50%. Like, and he's just been kind of growing into his game a little bit too. So
Right.
I want to have a better answer, but like it doesn't make sense of me. I'm actually a little bit happier that we're playing Chicago and not the Charlotte Hornets in the play-in.
Right. Although I think we actually got him in the play-in, oddly enough, a couple of seasons ago. That's the weird thing.
Yeah,
But I will say, yeah, sometimes it's befuddling as to why the Hornets, no matter how lowly they are, where they
sure.
can usually get up and get at it is against the Hawks. But it may be that common thread that you just mentioned between teams like the Heat that give the Hawks fits, although the Hawks will compete with them,
Yeah,
but they still always seem to come out on top, or the Bulls. It's sometimes a back and forth, but a lot of times the Bulls will come out on top. And with the Hornets, the last couple of seasons, at least, it's been them coming out on top, and that physicality that gets you to the free throw line. And then for you to make 21 of your 22 free throws,
sure.
it speaks volumes to the physicality. But I also want to say too, the Hornets have the ability to just hit the threes at clips. And that's what I saw tonight. Like, yeah, they ended the night at 39% from three, but it wasn't so much approaching the 40% mark as it was the clips. And
Hmm.
that's what they usually do. They'll just hit you with like a string of threes. And then all of a sudden you look up and they're back in the game. And that's what happened, I think, in the third quarter, where they kind of started to dig their way out of the hole. But you're right. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm literally looking at the starting lineup and saying, okay, this time around, yeah, you can look and it's Brandon Miller, right?
Hmm.
Although Miles Bridges ends up tipping in the game winner. but it's been Miles Bridges on the night. It's been
Mhm.
Gordon Hayward back in the day. It's been
Yeah.
LaMelo Ball. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, there's always that one player. And I will say Charlotte might be the one team where it's never the random role player, by the way, that
Yeah.
torches the Hawks. It's
It's the
always just
star
one of
player.
their starters. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's one of their stars that always figures it out and starts to get hot at the right time. And then we look up and you and I are having this conversation about Charlotte. So, yeah, I don't think that there's one answer when it comes to why the Hornets give the Hawks fits. I think it's different answers, but all of those things combined that have brought us to the point where 2 seasons in a row, we're talking about losing the season series. Now, another thing that may be considered, at least for tonight, might be your starting lineup, because Quinn Snyder, of course, started Trae Young, but also Bogdan Bogdanovic, Garrison Matthews, Vit Krejci, and Clint Capella. So, Tate, what did you think about his choices for the starting lineup and maybe how they played individually and collectively?
Well, you don't really have a ton of different options. And if I'm just being honest, like considering all these star players and starters that have been out or just swapping spots of being out and playing and being out, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like guys are taking turns. I'm like, is this by design? I know that sounds crazy, but I'm just saying facetiously, which I think goes back to the reason why we saw things transpired the way that it did tonight with tonight's game. Now, I don't want to blow it off like, no big deal. Who
Right.
cares? We lost to them. Who cares? Whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
I do understand the sake of, resting guys. But the results that we saw on tonight was a big part of, I mean, the starting lineup. We're talking about Trae. We're talking about Garrison Matthews, Vit Krejci, two guys beat in Garrison that is going to be very unlikely that we will see them in the starting lineup going forward. So this is probably and somewhat hopefully the end of that. But and with Bogey and Clint, Bogey is not
Mm-hmm.
even a regular starter. I
Right.
know it may appear that way as of right now, but remember, he was a guy that was coming off the bench and he was up for sixth man of the year, by the way. So
Yep.
I was okay with the guys that he started on tonight, just considering the fact that he doesn't really have a whole lot to roll out there with. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't love the idea of starting, anyone like Bruno. I mean, obviously you got Clint, so that wouldn't make sense, but
Mm-hmm.
I was actually okay with it. And if I'm just being honest, we're talking about Vit Krejci, who has been putting on display some pretty unique moves, and they've been going through the net. They've been going through the
Yeah.
basket. He's kind of
Yep.
been like coming with it a little bit.
Oh,
First, it was Bruno, coming
yep.
off of the bench, bringing the energy. Beat has been bringing the energy, and then
Mm-hmm.
obviously, lastly, you have Garrison Matthews, who now has surpassed Grayson Allen um, for um, the guy that leads the NBA in 3-point percentage at right around
Mm-hmm.
46%. So, I mean, these guys have been playing significantly well. You ask anybody outside of this market, they may not know who the hell you're talking about, but I think that they have been playing well, and that's why we've been seeing those guys selected in the lineup, and they played well tonight.
Yeah, and I think they did play well, but it's interesting for me because when I look at that lineup individually, obviously we talked about Trae Young already, and yeah, we had the expectation that he would be in that starting lineup. It would just
Mhm.
be a matter of what the minutes restriction was for him. And like we said earlier, played 21 minutes, and you expected that if Clint Capella was available, that he would get the start as well at center. The question was kind of where everyone else would fall in. Obviously, DeJounte got a night off; he didn't play tonight. So you expected Bogdan Bogdanovic to be inserted in the starting lineup because he has been that guy. But then it was kind of going to be interesting to see was was Quinn Snyder going to go with a small ball lineup, which he did. He went with 4 guards
Mhm.
for his starting lineup and a center, or was he going to try to kind of mix in at least maybe Bruno Fernando and Mo Gay, which he gave them minutes in the absence of DeAndre Hunter to kind of fill in the forward spot. But obviously, Quinn kind of went small ball, and it worked for the most part
Mhm.
until it didn't work. But I don't know if that's more a product of small ball versus it just didn't work. So, one more question that I wanted to ask as well,
Sure.
just to kind of give those guys credit, is the others. And
Yeah.
that is, and when I say the others, I wanted to make that clear because it's not just the bench who we saw give some solid performances that would be considered the others. But I would also include, as you mentioned, Garrison Matthews with 10 points and 3 rebounds, 4 assists. Vit Krejci with 19 points, 4 rebounds and 2 assists. But I would highlight Dylan Windler, who we've been wondering, like, what can he actually do? We hear he can shoot, but can he? Well, 12 points on 4 of 7 shooting. Bruno Fernando with 6 rebounds. Mo Gay with 7 rebounds and his first NBA points, by the way, tonight. And Kobe Buffkin with a very nice night, 11 points, 2 rebounds, and an assist. So kind of wanted to just give some credit and some love to the others, because when they did get inserted and ended up playing heavy minutes, they played quality minutes.
Well, I'll make this short if that's even possible. I've been the most excited about Muhammad Gay, if I'm just being honest.
Everybody in the arena said the same thing.
I've been so excited to see this dude play. I remember watching him when he was at Wazoo at Washington State.
Yeah.
And he played really well. And I just thought that he could really be a serviceable NBA player. And to see him with the Atlanta Hawks, I think was a very good pickup. And I kind of been bummed out a little bit, more than anything this season, by the fact that I haven't had a chance to see his development and his growth, which I think has been stunted a little bit because he hasn't been on the floor because of injuries or whatever, what have you. But I think that it was good to be able to see guys get extended minutes on tonight, because as we know, with the luck that we have had so far this season, being the Atlanta Hawks, is that we may really be relying and calling upon these guys for some very critical moments and key possessions and everything else. And hopefully what will pan out to be some very extensive, series against some really good teams in the playoffs.
I think that's why Quinn Snyder decided to start who he started. And that's why he gave heavy minutes to the second unit, because he needs to evaluate who's going to be able to give him quality minutes in the postseason. And like you, a little sad because Mo Gay, every time we had an opportunity to watch him down in College Park, it's like, oh yeah, he's on a minutes restriction. So we would get to see shades of the greatness, but then, we got to pull him because he's on a minutes restriction. So good to see him make a contribution tonight as well. And it's important because, hey, this team is about to go back on the road, and hopefully we'll get 2 dubs to wrap the regular season. We'll talk about it in Who's Got Next. This episode of our Locked On Hawks Postcast is also brought to you by BetterHelp. Now, life will be lifing, as we like to say, right? And a lot of times, because there's so much going on, we just don't have as much time as we wish we did to address some of the issues, challenges, and concerns that we might have. Like, our weather is kind of crazy right now, and that might be causing 60,000 people in Atlanta Metro some trouble because they don't have power. Well, how do you handle that? How do you manage the time to be able to address those issues? That's where BetterHelp comes in. It can help you to really prioritize. If you are thinking about starting therapy, this is a great place to start, and to help you to understand what is a priority and what's important. So here's the good news. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And here's the other good news. You can switch therapists at any time with no additional charge if for some reason your first therapist doesn't work out. So learn to make time for what makes you happy and what is truly important with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon, and start living your best life today. All right, Deshaun, the guys are down to the wire. A couple of road games on tap. They've got a game a Friday night in Minnesota against the Wolves, and then they wrap the season, regular season, that is, Sunday against the Pacers. So hopefully they can get at least 1, if not 2 dubs on the road. But first off, what do they need to do to get those wins, or to get a win?
You know how I am, Tanisha. I always go to the same thing every time, and I'm going to keep going to it until I see some improvement. Yeah, exactly. I don't know what's been happening as of late when it comes to free throw shooting. But 62% on tonight, I wasn't necessarily in love with. Those are freebies.
You're nice to say you weren't in love with them.
Well, listen, those are the I don't care who's in the starting lineup categories that make the difference to me, because everybody can hit a shot. Look at me. I know, right? Look who's talking, the guy that's sitting from the lazy boy critiquing the game. But I also am not a professional basketball player on this team that's expected to be able to hit a shot. when nobody's standing in your face and running out there at you. We need to be able to hit more shots and convert on them from the free throw line, because those are the little things. 62% tonight against the team that you have lost to for the second consecutive season, 3 out of 4 games, which is, well, I mean, how many is that? 6 out of 8 total of the last 2 years. And this last game comes down to 1 point. Ironically and coincidentally enough, we're talking about free throws that count for 1 point. That just being one of the things. The other thing is just the turnovers. And I get it. You know, we've got guys, while DeJounte, our primary ball handler, while our primary ball handler, Trae Young, had been out and whatever. He sees restricted minutes. The other one isn't playing as much. So there's guys that are expected to handle the ball more than, usual. I don't like to live with 18. That's quite a bit too many for me personally. But in a situation like this, I would have probably been a little bit more okay with it had I seen, 12 or 13 realistically. I think 5 more on top of that. I think 18 is just a little bit too many. And by the way, you can't do that against number 1.
Yeah.
Friday's game is the top team in the NBA, I think it is, if I'm not mistaken. Certainly on the West Coast.
On the West Coast.
And then on Sunday against probably one of the hotter teams from start to finish, most impressive all this year on the Eastern Conference, being the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah, and I think with Minnesota, the other piece with the Wolves, who are, as we speak, giving the Nuggets fits, just to speak on how good they are playing. And they're playing that way and giving them fits in Denver. So that tells you a lot about how much they've grown and matured and evolved as a team. But part of the reason that they're able to give the Nuggets fits is because they can play big. So that's one of the things the Hawks also have challenges with: teams that can play big and teams that can play physical. So they have to be prepared for that. So I'll be very intrigued to see what lineup Quinn Snyder puts forth on Friday, seeing as though he did a 4 guard, 1 center lineup tonight. And Big O says it was good to see Trae come back and have a great game. I would say too, you know what, Big O, I would call that a great game as well. And I would expect to see an even better showing on Friday, but I also expect them to be prepared for a very physical game and to be very mindful and careful of that, because what you don't want is to have any type of relapse for that injury. And Willie was saying Trae didn't look bad tonight. And you know what? I would actually give him a little bit more credit than even not bad. I'd say good, because when you're perfect from the field, perfect from 3 included in that, and perfect from the free throw line, and you're
considering
able to
the circumstances,
and 4 rebounds, I'm going to give you your credit for being able to be committed to two-way play, and you did that in 21 minutes of action. So I do think that's key for them. And I think with the Pacers, let's just face it, you better get ready to outshoot them. I mean, that's the way you beat the Pacers.
Yeah, you got to have more points at the end of the game than they do, and that's just what it comes down to.
Right, exactly. Remember, they dropped 150 on you, so that's how they roll. And that's just, like we said, that's just how they roll. And I think too, and we'll talk about this also as we get a little bit closer, is just looking at the strategy that Quinn employs for these next 2 games as he continues to get prepared for the postseason. Because even what we saw tonight was 9 times out of 10 an opportunity for him to evaluate some of the others, but also to see where Trae was as they get closer to the play-in round. And listen, we appreciate you guys for stopping by, because this is the #1 place to hang out after every game. Remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for more on the Hawks, of course, check out our guy, Brad Rowland with Locked On Hawks. We will see you Friday night.